Camera sync speed. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, today we're filming in the garage because it's June in Washington and it just keeps raining and then not raining and then raining again. And I got sick of going in and out of the outside, so welcome to my messy garage. In this video, I want to conduct another experiment, and the experiment is I want to know what's in a Kong cooler versus an Igloo cooler. So I'm gonna cut both these things in half and take a peek, because why the hell not? A little bit of background before we jump right in. This Igloo Ice Cube, this cooler here on the right, this was my go-to cooler for many years. I like this cooler because it's very inexpensive. I forget how much it costs, but I don't know. I'm not going to make anything up. You can look it up online. It's not very expensive. And you could fit a lot of stuff in it. So you could fit a lot of food and drinks and that kind of thing and top it off. And then you get like a nice little package of goodies. The trouble with this ice cube is that the walls are super thin and it doesn't keep ice cold for very long. So what this means is your beverages will get warm, the ice will melt, and your food will get soggy. On my left, this is a Kong cooler. A Kong cooler is basically just like a Yeti cooler, but better. It's better because it has lots more features. I have other videos on this channel about Kong coolers, so I won't digress too much. But I will just basically tell you that the dividers inside the cooler double up as cutting boards. These are food grade plastic cutting boards. And so that's kind of a handy feature. But the feature that really makes it shine is that these cutting boards can also be used as little countertops. So Kong has an accessory called a Kong kicker, and it slides into the side of the cooler. Then you kick out the handle, and you can fit your cutting board in that little Kong kicker. And now you can simultaneously chop food, prepare your meal while you're camping without it impeding the use of the cooler. So, very practical. This is an expensive cooler. It's in the $300-400 range, similar to a Yeti or an Orca cooler or the dozens of other roto-molded coolers on the market today. But what's unique about Kong is the features that I just mentioned, so you get more bang for your buck. So I propose we cut this cooler first because I have no idea how I'm going to cut these things, and I'd rather learn on this instead of butchering that. So that's what I'm going to do. Oof. Today I am going to be cutting with a Sawzall, and I'm going to be wearing safety protection because you don't want any cooler shards in your eye. And I'm also going to wedge, I've spent a little time thinking about this, and I think I'm just going to wedge the cooler in between two pieces of 2x4, something like that. And hopefully that'll give me enough stability where I can slice through the cooler without actually hurting myself or damaging anything. So let me just quickly affix these. That's pretty solid. And I forgot I have hearing protection. That's always nice. That may or may not work, and we're about to find out. In terms of blades, we have a lot to choose from. The torch, torch, a mini torch. This one's called the Axe, and it's the longest one, so I like it. I'm gonna go with this one. Always pull the battery out when you're putting the blade in. That way something can't go terribly wrong. I'm also going to take the lid off because we'll cut that later. Here goes nothing. In the words of The Simpsons, 1, 2, better not sue. I also want to quickly say that if either Igloo or Kong are watching this video, please forgive me. I'm not doing this to be disrespectful or rude. I'm just genuinely curious what's inside these coolers, and I'm following my curiosity. It's actually working pretty good. Look at that. Okay, so what I'm seeing is two different colored pieces of plastic with some foam, a little thin layer of foam in the middle. Interesting. We're going to do close-ups of all of this, so don't worry about it. And just for the heck of it, let's cut the lid in half. How about like that? The lid is absolutely positively hollow. I mean, look at that. Camera 2, look at that. The lid is super hollow. And so that hollow lid, I imagine, doesn't really do much for insulation. Most likely, when cold air escapes the Igloo cooler, it kind of does so through the lid. The body of the cooler is not hollow. There's a thin layer of foam that goes all the way around the sides and the base. And to be honest, this is surprising to me because the way this cooler feels, it feels kind of cheap and flimsy. And so to see that there is actually insulation in the body of the cooler is encouraging to me. I'm actually impressed. I suppose this will get really interesting when we cut the Kong in half, because then we'll have something to compare this to, because currently I'm just looking at it and I'm like, looks like a cooler to me. So let's move these aside. And we'll probably also have to pull these out. Okay, so one thing that roto-molded coolers are not is light. So when you go and lift them, you're going to find that they're pretty heavy. So be smart about it. Lift with your legs, not with your back. Oof. And for the sake of this experiment, I'm not going to cut through any sort of metal or anything. I'm going to take some of these accessories, take them off to the side. And I'm also going to pop off the lid because why the heck not? I did a little bit of homework before I started this, and basically I had to dig for the rods that hold the lid on. Took about an hour, and you didn't really miss anything. I just had to hammer on the sides of these coolers until I was able to extract these rods, and the rods hold the lid on. So just so that we're clear and transparent, that's what happened there. I'm also going to take out this rubber seal because that might impede my cutting. I'll throw that out of there, and we'll remove the lid for now. Don't you worry, we're going to cut through the lid, but first let's cut through the body, and once again we're going to wedge it in between two pieces of 2x4. That'll do. That will do. I'm nervous. I don't really want to cut this cooler in half, but it's for the sake of science. So here it goes. Off to this, oh, we're gonna have to cut the lid, so let's put that there for now. Whoa! Look at that. That's quite a different story. Holy moly. Look at that. At first glance, I see a lot more plastic and a lot more foam. Let's cut the lid real quick, and then we'll break everything down. Ba-boom! Ba-boom! Everything's falling apart, but I'm keeping it all together. Let's do it like this. Kids, don't try this at home. Okay, let's make sense of all of it. I don't need that. Let's just position the coolers so that the scene is interesting and somewhat cinematic. I'd say that's about it. Then I'm going to grab a tape measure and a step stool, which I've been hiding behind this bench of mine. And we're going to come over to this side and explore the nitty and the gritty. Okay, so with my tape measure, I'm going to measure the sidewalls of the Igloo. And it looks like they are 1 1/4 inch thick. I'm also going to go ahead and measure the bottom. That looks like 3/4 of an inch. It's definitely not an inch. And then the top of the Igloo, of course, is hollow. It's like super duper hollow. There's nothing in there. It's literally 2 pieces of thin plastic with air inside. And then when we slide over here to the Kong, it looks like the sidewalls are 2 1/2 inches thick. So literally twice the size of this. This is 1 1/4, this is 2 1/2. The bottom looks like it's 2 1/4, so slightly thinner on the bottom than the sides. And then the lid looks like 2 3/4. So 2 3/4, 2 1/2, 2 1/4. The lid of the Kong is actually the thickest part. So I think it's kind of interesting that whereas Igloo decided to not put any insulation in the lid, Kong made their lid the beefiest part of the cooler. And what this tells me, if I'm just kind of extrapolating here, is that there's cool air escaping through the lid. Last summer, I actually did an ice retention test with all of these coolers and more. I took 4 different Kong coolers, including this 70 quart, as well as this Igloo, and I filled them with ice to the brim just to see how long they would hold that ice. The entire experiment is on YouTube. You can go check it out. I'll link to it in the description below this video. But the skinny was, this cooler did the worst, and this cooler lasted 9 or 10 days. And now that the coolers are cut in half, I understand why. The walls of the Igloo are thin and somewhat flimsy. The top has no insulation whatsoever, minus a little bit of R value for just some trapped air, versus the Kong cooler, which has a lot more insulation, both in foam as well as sidewall. And then the lid is very impressive. It's the thickest part of the cooler. So this is really interesting stuff. There's a reason this lasts 9 days and this lasts 3 or 4. I actually don't remember off the top of my head what the experiment found for this specifically. I think it's like 3 days. So the thicker the sidewalls, the longer your food and beverages are going to stay cooler. I think we've definitely seen that just by cutting these coolers in half. As I'm looking at these coolers and closely inspecting them, I'm noticing that the sidewalls, the plastic sidewalls, are drastically different from cooler to cooler. For example, on this little Igloo, they're super thin and flimsy, whereas when we move over to the Kong, you can see it's quite a bit thicker. And that gives the cooler a lot of rigidity. Okay. let's make sense of all this. So, to me, the difference is crazy stark. I just can't believe how much beefier this cooler is versus this cooler. This just feels like a slightly more reinforced styrofoam box. You can imagine that as you go camping, as you take road trips, the walls and the plastic will break down and this will just become garbage relatively quick. And then you'll have to buy another one. Versus a roto-molded cooler that's going to have a lot more life in it. Look at this. And there's a little bit of play. But I bet I could put my entire weight, which is about 180 pounds, on this cooler and nothing. It's holding me just fine. So what this tells me, outside of just the fact that it's way more durable, is that this product will last way longer. You can safely use it as a bench. So if you and your buddies go camping and you want a comfortable place to sit, you can safely put 3 or 4 people on this, or 2 or 3 people on this, and nothing's going to happen to it. You're not going to damage it in any way. It's going to keep it's going to retain its ability to cooler. Versus with something like this, which I have actually sat on before, and because the lid is hollow, it just compresses, and it feels like I'm sitting on a flimsy toilet seat, and eventually I think it'll just break down, and you'll need to buy another cooler. And that has certainly been my experience. So over the years, I've owned about 5 of these. And they're great little coolers, but they just don't last that long. So I will say this, kind of in conclusion, in summary, if you're looking to save some money in the short term, you could buy one of these coolers and it'll serve you for a while, but eventually you're going to need to buy another cooler, which will cost you more money. If, on the other hand, you want to fork over a little bit more money up front, you can invest in something like a Kong cooler, and it very well might be the last cooler you ever buy. So that's just what I have to say about that. I'm curious at this point to open it up to the comments and see what you guys think. So leave me a comment below. Tell me what you thought about the experiment. Were you impressed with the difference between the 2 coolers? Or have you seen it all on YouTube and it doesn't really matter? Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, check you later.